Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Backcourt Press NBA Talk and Podcast. I'm your co-host, Hunter Mennick, here with my fellow co-host, Zach Vinci. Say hello.
What's up, everyone?
And today, we got a very special episode for everyone as we conclude our final series of this ranking all 30 NBA franchises from worst to first. Today, we do our top 10. Very exciting stuff. This series has gone on, for two episodes. We've had some disagreements in the comments, some people enjoying the content. So what do you have to say to people that may have disagreed with any of the stuff we've said 30 to 10 so far?
I mean, a lot of it is, I think a good portion of it is objective because people look at different aspects when they're doing these kind of rankings. Especially with, a lot of these teams have like 75 plus years of history. And what do you look at when you're ranking? Do you look at overall team success? Do you look at like the height of it, the peak? Or do you want a team that's consistently good? Or how much do you value championships? How much do you value finals appearances? How much do you value the amount of all-stars they've had? How much do you value? There's so many aspects that go into it that I think definitely there's somewhere you could, there's somewhere you could argue like 4 or 5 spots too high, 4 or 5 spots too low. But I think in the overall gist of it, I think we're pretty accurate. It is our list, but I think I don't think you can make any major disagreements. I think most of the stuff would be nitpicks.
That's fair. Before we get started on our top 10, make sure you follow us on Instagram at Backcourt Press. We've been very, very, consistently updating that Instagram page, posting on it. We're up to over 875 followers now, which is getting pretty exciting. So if any of you guys are coming from that on the website, thank you for joining us. We've had a bunch of different series on there, whether it's just talking about present day NBA. Zach's doing this incredible series with a best player on every single team, which we covered on the last episode. And now he's even starting another series where he goes through different playoff series. And these take a very long time to make. You can definitely see them in the post. So go show that some love if you haven't already at Backcourt Press on Instagram.
Yeah. Yesterday, I know I posted the Jazz Sonics one earlier today. I probably spent about 4 hours yesterday compiling that post. A majority of it is just because I watched the entirety of Game 7 of that series. Most of the games I watched just the fourth quarter, some other key moments, the overtimes, but I wanted to watch through all of Game 7, which was enjoyable to watch through. A lot of great players on those teams.
Exactly. As always, we try to give you guys our best NBA analysts' perspectives. So we try to know exactly what we're talking about. We're not here to just talk present day NBA, be casuals. We're here to really give you our true advice and go in depth on every subject that we talk about. So make sure you follow us on Instagram, follow us on Twitter at @BackcourtPress_, and comment on where you're watching this on, whether it's Facebook or YouTube. Make sure you're subscribed to my YouTube channel, and follow us on Facebook at Bobby Blackjack, at I-95 Sports Network, and at Hunter Mennick on Facebook. So without further ado, let's get right into our top 10. Next podcast, most likely, will be back to present day NBA talk. Just want to throw that out there because, we have taken 3 weeks off. Some stuff's happened. MVP race is getting closer and closer, so it's about to be fun. But going into our top 10, we ended off last time with a banger, and we're going to start this one off with a banger. I know we're both from the Syracuse area. You go to Syracuse, I'm in Philadelphia now, but a lot of the people we're around are New York Knicks fans. So let's start off with our number 10 ranking. Or the worst of the top 10 in the New York Knicks. They've been around since 1946, 1947. They have a 48% win percentage, just under a 50% win percentage in the playoffs, 2 NBA finals, as we've talked about before, in 1970 and 1973, yet 8 finals appearances, making a 25% win percentage. They've had great players, a lot of older players that we talk about, like Patrick Ewing, Willis Reed, Walt Frazier, Dave DeBusschere. And then, they have one of the best scorers of all time, according to half of our comments, and Carmelo Anthony, a part of their franchise. So what are your thoughts on the New York Knicks, and how could they possibly, in the upcoming years, increase their spot on this list?
So you look at the Knicks, and we have finally, in the top 10, reached teams that have more than one championship. From what we've seen so far, it's all been teams that haven't won one yet, or teams that have just won. And we're finally getting to those franchises that have had success multiple times, that have won multiple championships. And the Knicks are the first of two teams that we will see. The next team with 2 championships will be next. Not that we're just basing it off championships, but obviously that is arguably the biggest thing that we're looking at when ranking these. So 2 championships is obviously very, very good in the top 10 in NBA history. But you look at back, those finals were both in the 70s. Again, we don't discriminate their history here. They were a very long time ago, and the Knicks have not been able to repeat that success. And I think the biggest reason why they are the lower end of the top 10 is you look at the 21st century. This is a team that has won 1 playoff series since the year 1999-2000. They were great in the 90s and the 70s, two decades for the Knicks where they were easily one of the top 5 teams in the Eastern Conference in both of those decades. But then you also have some decades like the last 2 where they have just been, I hate to say it, but a poverty franchise, and they just have not been able to get anything going. It's very rare to see them in playoff form, so that's why this year has been such a big deal for them. And you just look back at their overall, they've been to 8 championships, which is more than most of the other teams on this list. So obviously they are still a very good franchise. Historically, they've been very successful. But you just look at the recent history, and like I said, a big part of this is consistency, and the Knicks have not been consistent in their success.
Are there any players, possibly ones I mentioned or other players that I haven't mentioned, that really stand out to you in this franchise?
I'm a huge Willis Reed fan. I think he was a huge part of the, especially that 1970 championship team. And I just don't think he gets a lot of respect. In my opinion, he's definitely a top 15 center of all time. And I think he could push for a top 10 argument as well. But no, you pretty much covered most of them. I also want to mention Patrick Ewing too, because I know he gets a lot of respect for the champion when they made the championship in the 90s, in the early 90s against MJ. But I also want to shout him out when they were the 8th seed and they ended up making that championship run as well. Again, they ended up losing, but still a very, very good team that made to the finals, led by an older Patrick Ewing. That's something I don't think gets as much respect.
Fair enough. And talking for more present day Knicks, they've been one of the most surprising teams in the NBA this season. I believe we both had them ranked in our bottom 4 in power rankings before the season. I hate to bring that up.
Last.
Yeah, we both had. I think I might have had them second to last or dead last as well with you. So this team, I don't think anyone expected Julius Randle to be doing what he's doing. Technically, if you're talking to a Knicks fan, he's in the MVP conversation. We've said it multiple times, leading his team in all 3 of the major statistics, which is points, rebounds, and assists. RJ Barrett's really made a very good leap for efficiency-wise from his first to second season. I think he needed a little bit of disrespect in his first season, seeing that he didn't make an all-rookie team at all. And Tom Thibodeau is really showing that he can lead this team to the playoffs. They made the trade for Derrick Rose, trading away Dennis Smith Jr., who wasn't even playing for them. And that Derrick Rose trade is looking great. Emmanuel Quickley has been their top rookie so far in the season. If you would have told me that in the beginning of the season, I would have thought you were crazy, because this team was so high on Obi Toppin, and yet Quickley's come in and been top 5 in Rookie of the Year voting this entire season. The only thing is that I don't think they have the pieces right now to actually compete and get out of the first round. Right now, they're sitting at the 7th seed at a 500 record, and you look at the teams that they're going to have to go up against. No matter what, they're probably going to go up against the Sixers, the Nets, the Bucks, the Heat, or the Celtics if they land in one of those bottom 3-4 seeds. And to me, I don't see them beating any of those teams. They don't have the star power. I know they have the passion and the will, but if we're going to talk about recent years, this team has been just abysmal. And so to see this franchise really looking up, I could see a big name star in free agency in one of these upcoming seasons looking to sign with this team and how passionate they are.
For sure. I know you mentioned that you don't think they're going to be able to compete this year, but I think it's very crucial that they do end up making the playoffs. And I think that could be a difference maker in how the rest of the future of this franchise goes, even if it's just in the play-in game. And I think that's because of their culture they've established this year, which we haven't seen in recent years from the Knicks. They're very gritty, very hardworking. You can see the passion out on the floor. And I compare it to a couple of other teams in recent years that have had that level of passion and hardworking. The Los Angeles Clippers in 2019, which right then with the Danilo Gallinari, Tobias Harris, Patrick Beverley teams, that attracted Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. How about the 2019 Nets as well, with D'Angelo Russell, Spencer Dinwiddie, Jared Dudley, Jared Allen, that team attracted Kevin Durant, attracted Kyrie Irving. Even the 2018-2019 Miami Heat as well, with Goran Dragic and those guys attracted Jimmy Butler. All I'm saying is the type of culture that the Knicks are building right now is what attracts superstars. And being in a big market like New York, this is the best thing that could have happened to this team. I think they're definitely on the rise right now.
Exactly. I know we had one of the podcasts where teams on the uprise, and the New York Knicks were definitely on that list just for the pure fact that they really were looking rough in the beginning of in the preseason. And next thing you know, they come out and have a 500 record, which is, I think, about 10 games more than anyone thought that they would at this point in the season. So as a New Yorker and someone that has, been surrounded by Knicks fans, I do hope for Knicks fans all around the world that they do end up sneaking into one of those, that 6, 7, or 8 seed, just for the pure fact that this team deserves it. So
the world is a better place when the New York Knicks are a playoff team. It just feels right. It just feels right.
Exactly. Moving on from the New York Knicks at our 10th spot to our 9th spot, being a team that, had high hopes going into the season with, James Harden still a part of the team. And now they are on roughly a 15-game losing streak since Christian Wood got injured. And that is the Houston Rockets. Starting off in 1967, 1968, they've won 2 NBA Finals, the 2 years that Michael Jordan was not a part of the league, in 1994 and 1995. Made the Finals 4 times, twice in the 80s and just the two times in the 90s that they won it. Have an above 500 win percentage at just under 53% and just under a 50% playoff win percentage. And as we know, they are known for their big men in Hakeem Olajuwon, Moses Malone, Yao Ming, Ralph Sampson. But don't forget about those guards and James Harden and Tracy McGrady. What do you have to say about the Houston Rockets franchise?
Consistency. That's the difference between the Knicks and the Rockets, and that's why I have the Rockets ahead of the Knicks. Where the Knicks have had long stretches where they're just not a good team at all, the Rockets are always a top team in the West. Their longest playoff drought since the early 70s is just 4 years, which is very impressive as a franchise. Definitely numbers for a top 10. You mentioned only 4 championship appearances, which is going to end up being the lowest in the entire top 10. But I don't think that knocks them any further because, again, that's more than most of the teams that are outside the top 10. We were looking at like the Thunder and the Hawks have it at the higher end of the 11 through 20 range, and they both also had 4 finals appearances. So the Rockets are right with those guys. They just happen to have more success overall as a franchise with those 2 finals wins in the 90s with Hakeem Olajuwon. And again, they've made it they've advanced further in the playoffs than a lot of these other teams. They've made it to the Western Conference Finals 8 times in their career history, in their team history. And you mentioned they had a lot of superstars too. I think a lot more than a lot of those other teams. You mentioned all those guys before. I'd also like to mention Calvin Murphy and Clyde Drexler, 2 other really slept-on players for Rockets franchise. Especially Calvin Murphy. I think he's a guy that doesn't get as much respect as he deserves. But yeah, and then we've seen James Harden in the recent years keep the Rockets afloat. This is going to be the first playoffs that they haven't made since the early 2010s, which is I think the longest playoff streak that is going to be broken in the league. This is just a really good franchise overall. And like I said about the Knicks, the Rockets are a team that the world's better when the Rockets are competing.
Yeah, going more recently, James Harden, they had the Russell Westbrook years, the Chris Paul years. They haven't been able to find a point guard that works next to James Harden. I think that's because everyone's seeing right now in the Brooklyn Nets that James Harden is a point guard, and he doesn't need another point guard next to him. Kyrie Irving's looking great as that off-ball kind of shooting guard where he could work his magic, but James Harden's passing ability is one of the most underrated aspects of his game. He's leading the league in assists this year, I believe upwards of 11 assists. He's triple-double machine for that Nets team. They're on a 13-game win streak. They've won like 12 out of their past 13 games or around there, and that's been without Kevin Durant. And that's just talking about the Nets because James Harden for the Houston Rockets was an incredible player. Obviously, his MVP season, he's just an automatic 30 points per game whenever he really wants to. One of the best offensive-minded players and offensive skilled players that I think in our recent generation that we've ever seen. And that's one of the reasons why they've made the playoffs so many times. You talk about the consistency. Yep. I believe when the San Antonio Spurs playoff streak was broken last season, the Houston Rockets took that spot, and they've made it to the playoffs every year since the James Harden trade, and even a little bit before that, I believe. when Jeremy Lamb was traded for James Harden, and you look back on it, and the Thunder really are going to regret doing that, because that probably put the Rockets into this top 10 slot just for the recent success that they've had. Because without Harden, who knows what their recent success would look like.
Man, imagine if James Harden was in the Eastern Conference this whole time. I mean, I think about the Rockets. I mean, I think you look at those Rockets teams the last decade. I think you take James Harden off of any of them, and they're a lottery team. They're a bottom 5 to 8 team in the league. I don't think James Harden ever really had a significant amount of help until probably about 2018 when Chris Paul was around and they were the best team in the West. And even then, Chris Paul was a great second option, but it was Harden's team. And I just imagine if Harden had a little bit of help and if he was in a much easier conference, not having to go up against the Warriors and the Spurs and the Thunder every year, I'm telling you, I think James Harden would have had a lot more success, and I think he'd be a champion right now. But for the future of the Rockets in general, I think Christian Wood has got to be the cornerstone that they build around. You've seen they've lost, I think, 14 in a row without him. Maybe it's even more now. When they originally were off to an 0-500 start when he was playing. MVP conversation? I don't know. But Christian Wood is fantastic, and he should definitely be the piece they build around. Otherwise, I think they need to trade everything away. I think you should get rid of John Wall, get rid of Victor Oladipo, trade away every piece that you have, and build around Christian Wood.
A couple other players I like on that Houston Rockets team. Jason Tate came out of nowhere this season and has started. He's played 37 games for them, started in 25 of them. He's averaging just under 10 points per game, but he's been a very sleeper player. I think his game has been really fun. Yep. He just plays. I feel like the NBA this season has all these random names that just come out and play hard defense, they hustle, they play like strong rebounding games and everything. I think Jason Tate's a perfect thing for that. Another player, thank God that the Houston Rockets picked up Kevin Porter Jr. I think he is another player that this team could build around with Christian Wood. Averaged upwards of 25 points per game in the G League. Came onto the Houston Rockets, and just in his 3 games is averaging 17 points per game and 8 assists. He is a player that reminds me, honestly, a lot of James Harden, a lefty player, very flashy, has the passing ability, has the shooting ability. And I think that he'd be a great shooting guard / point guard next to Christian Wood. And you build around them. They got a lot of trade assets and draft picks through the James Harden and Russell Westbrook trades. And I'm just excited to see what they end up doing with those draft picks and hopefully building a great team around Christian Wood and Kevin Porter Jr.
For sure.
And Kenyon Martin Jr. is on the team, which I think is very funny. Not a lot of people talk about him because he was a G League player, but yes. And trade PJ Tucker. PJ Tucker looks awful. He's playing 30 minutes.
He needs to be out of there.
Started every game for this team. God, PJ Tucker, just blow it up a little bit more.
No, I agree. He's got to be out of there.
Yeah, he's looking rough, and there's some championship contending teams that really could use him. And we all know that the Brooklyn Nets and Los Angeles Lakers just want to go after every single player that hits the market.
Yep.
Moving on from our 9 to our 8 seed, going back to the Eastern Conference in here, the team that really, really wanted to give Michael Jordan a run for their money and did in the late 80s, early 90s, and that is the Detroit Pistons, starting in 1948, 1949. I know one of your favorite players of all time, Isaiah Thomas, is a part of one of the more famous players when you talk about the Detroit Pistons history. They have 3 NBA titles, one in 1989, 1990, and then again a decade later in 2004. Made the playoffs 42 times in their franchise history. Have just under 49% win percentage, but an above 500 playoffs win percentage, which might be the first time we've actually talked about a team with an above 500 playoff win percentage. What are your thoughts on the Detroit Pistons? And we'll talk about present Detroit later.
Yeah. So you look at now we finally reached our first franchise with 3 championships. As the Knicks and the Rockets were the only ones with 2. The Pistons are the lowest of the 3, and I think the biggest knock for them as a franchise is similar to the Knicks, where they've had long periods of time when they're just not a very good franchise. I mean, you look at what we're in right now. The Pistons really haven't been good since 2008 in our current decade. That's an entire decade of the 2010s where they were probably a bottom 5 franchise, which is not a very good mark. They've also been around since the 40s, so they've been around a very long time, one of the oldest franchises in the league. And in that time, they've made 7 finals, 13 conference finals appearances, which is a very average mark. I don't think it's exceptional, in the 70+ years as a franchise, but I think it's around what they should be. So I don't think I added anything for that, and I don't think I took away for that. I think they're just a very, very average numbers for a franchise, and the 3 championships really elevates them up from a middle tier team to a top 10 team. And another thing that I think is really great about them, this is the first team we've talked about overall that had 2 different core teams that won a championship.
Mhm.
Because the Knicks were both 70s teams, Walt Frazier, Willis Reed, those guys. And the Rockets was both the Hakeem Olajuwon days. Here we had the 80s, 90s teams with Isaiah Thomas and Joe Dumars leading the team, Dennis Rodman. But then we also have the 2014 with Chauncey Billups and Ben Wallace. So I think that's an impressive mark for them that they had two different periods of success where they won championships. But yeah, that's pretty much all I got for the Pistons. Very average franchise, but two very important periods of time where they were very, very good, and they won a couple championships out of that.
Exactly. Also, that 2004 championship against the Shaq and Kobe led Lakers is an incredible performance, especially by the players that you mentioned in Ben Wallace and the crew around him. So just seeing Chauncey Billups, one of those underrated point guards in your opinion of all time. I remember when we talked about our top 10 point guards, you said you had to mention his name. But looking at recent times, this franchise has just gone very downhill. There have been guys they've had a good array of big men. I remember when they drafted Greg Monroe to play next to Andre Drummond for a while. That never ended up working. They traded Drummond away for John Henson. They brought in Blake Griffin. And although Blake Griffin had 1 year of looking great, injuries really derailed his career, and now he's a part of the Brooklyn Nets, which is, of course it is. Of course he is. But besides that, they've had Derrick Rose, they've had young talent. But really, these young players don't seem to be working out. I remember I was very high on Sekou Doumbouya coming out of the draft, and they haven't played him more than 12 minutes a game over the past couple seasons. And just understanding that this team really just does not know how to develop young players. We were both high on Killian Hayes. I think we both still are once he comes back from injury. I think that's looking upwards, but we've seen their big free agency signing and almost all-star snub, I guess you could say. Jeremy Grant has been playing fantastic as the number 1 player on this team. But around him, I don't really know what this team is building for. They don't have that many draft picks since they never really made any big trades to trade away a big player for it. They kind of just have their draft pick. And so what are you looking forward to for this Detroit Pistons future? So I remember when we did our free agency talk, you were like, you did not like any of their free agency signings. What are your thoughts on it now?
Yeah.
Halfway through the season?
The Pistons lost Andre Drummond, Blake Griffin, Derrick Rose, Christian Wood. I feel like there was one more. Oh, Luke Kennard. And out of all of that, all they got was 2 second-round picks.
And John Henson.
This franchise is in the dumps right now. Man, I don't know. They've had one season above 500 in their last 13 seasons. I'm sorry, this is not a good team. This franchise has completely gone off the rails since the mid 2000s, and I really don't know where they're headed. I don't think they have an identity. I don't think they have a franchise player. I don't think they have any direction they're going in. They're just floating in the bottom with nowhere to go. I like Killian Hayes though. I hate that he's in Detroit. That's the one team I didn't want to draft him because I thought that would. I mean, just my luck that the two guards I really like coming into this draft are Halliburton and Killian Hayes, and they go to the Pistons and the Kings. Like, of all teams, come on, it's got to be the Pistons and the Kings. But yeah, the Pistons are resting their laurels on the late 80s, early 90s teams and the mid 2000s teams because you can't look at their recent history. I'm sorry for recent Pistons fans because if you're looking at this as a top 8 franchise, it's probably because you weren't alive.
Exactly. Staying in the Eastern Conference and going from one Eastern Conference team that was good in the 90s and bad in recent years to a team that was okay in the 90s but very, very good since we've been alive. Coming in at our number 7 spot is the Miami Heat, a more recent franchise starting right in, right below the 1990s and 1988. They have 3 NBA titles in 2006, 2012, and 2013. 21 playoff years, and they have a win percentage of just over 52%, and even more impressively, a playoffs win percentage of just over 56%. This team has made 6 NBA finals all since we've been alive, which is, shows us how incredible of a player Dwayne Wade is. If you really look at it, Dwayne Wade won the championship with Shaq and then went on to recruit LeBron James and Chris Bosh for those 2011 through 2014, and ended up going 2 for 4, yet making it 4 times in a row. One of the more underwhelming teams in NBA history, if you really look into what they said that they were going to do and what they did accomplish. But, recently going to the NBA Finals just last season with Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo in one of the really one of the best playoff runs that we've seen in recent history. They also have incredible players that I haven't mentioned, like Alonzo Mourning, Tim Hardaway, Glenn Rice, and of course, Udonis Haslem cannot be taught. If you're talking Miami Heat, you cannot forget about Udonis Haslem. What are your thoughts on the Miami Heat franchise?
Once again, we're looking at 2 teams that have had same number of championships, only 1 difference in finals appearances between the Heat and the Pistons. Looking at success-wise, they're very neck and neck. But you look at the Pistons, they've been around for so much longer than the Heat. And the Heat have been able to pretty much make up that ground in just over 30 years as a franchise, which is wildly impressive. Would you say they've had 21 playoff appearances in 33 seasons, which is a great mark. They've made it to the Eastern Conference Finals 8 times in 33 years, which again, that is, to me, incredibly impressive for a young franchise. And they've had sustained success in every single decade. In the 90s, you had Tim Hardaway and Alonzo Mourning, which ended up being MJ's biggest competition in 96-97 in the Eastern Conference Finals. One could argue they would have won the championship if they hadn't run into MJ. You obviously have the Dwayne Wade teams of the 2000s with Shaquille O'Neal, too, won a championship in 06. You have the LeBron and D Wade teams of the early 2010s that won 2 championships. And then you have the Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo team of the early 2020s that made it to the championship. And who knows what they're going to do in the next couple of years with those guys. So this team always builds a good team. They've got a very good culture, very strong front office. I just think of the Heat and I think of success, man. I can't remember the last time the Heat weren't one of the top teams in the East. So I think they definitely deserve their spot as the seventh best franchise of all time. And honestly, I think they're one of those franchises that can only go down, because if they start to have long periods of no playoff, that could jump them down, because they're high due to their consistency and the fact that they've accomplished a lot in a little bit of time.
Exactly. If we're talking more recently, coming off that NBA Finals appearance, they had a really slow start to the season. Jimmy Butler couldn't even be in the All-Star game due to the fact that he hadn't played a lot due to COVID restrictions. And then next thing you know, this team goes on an incredible win streak. They've won 9 out of their last 10 games. And now they're sitting at 21-18 in the Eastern Conference, which makes them the 4 seed. And to see that this team started off so slow and people were like, are the Miami Heat going to make the playoffs? And now they're sitting 3 games above 500 on a 4-game win streak, winning 9 out of their last 10 is just remarkable. I think one of the most underrated aspects of Miami Heat, their franchise, is their coaching. They had Pat Riley for a while. He's now the GM of this team, he's been an incredible GM. And then Eric Spoelstra is one of the more underrated coaches in NBA history, in my opinion. It's very hard to, coach a team and recruit guys like LeBron James and Chris Bosh to come to a team. Eric Spoelstra did it, kept their egos down. And although they lost the one championship to the Spurs and then the other one to the Dallas Mavericks, this team, that they could have been a dynasty if they all stuck together and LeBron didn't want to go win a championship in Cleveland. But we're looking at recently, Jimmy Butler's going to be hopefully what it looks like, a Dwayne Wade type player for the Heat for years to come. He's built such an incredible culture there. Tyler Hero has been an incredible draft pick. I know people are very underwhelmed by his season this year, which I don't really understand why. He's averaging just around, I believe, 17 points per game.
16. I was looking at the comparison between RJ Barrett and Tyler Hero yesterday, and it's like almost neck and neck. But that's also RJ Barrett is a second option, and Tyler Hero is a 4th option. So I think people need to start respecting Tyler Hero a little bit.
This team has so much young talent. I know I really like Precious Achiuwa. one of their big men that looks like he's going to be a very good player for years to come. They have Duncan Robinson, Kendrick Nunn. I know we're both not a fan of him, but it's still only his second year, and he's starting a lot this season. And he's averaging upwards of 14 points per game. But they re-signed Goran Dragic. He's getting older. But the culture that this Miami Heat team has built, they're a team that seems to attract every single player that goes on the trading mark. And just people want to go play in Miami because it looks fun. Until obviously this whole Myers Leonard incident, they were kind of quietly in the media, winning those past couple games. We won't get into the Myers Leonard incident, as that stuff is not acceptable. But if we're going to talk about actual season success, Jimmy Butler, it's crazy to see that people have not been talking about him for the All-Star game. But yet I've seen many posts in recent days for Jimmy Butler for MVP. So what do you think about that case? And could you make the case for Jimmy Butler for the most valuable player for the season?
Jimmy Butler is incredible, but the Heat would have to.
The
Heat would have to be a top. They'd have to be a top 3 team in the East. I mean, the East is garbage, man. I'm sorry, the East is terrible, and to be the MVP in the East, you have to be Joel Embiid carrying a team with like no one else, or even James Harden, because James Harden is playing lights out, and Giannis Antetokounmpo. I mean, those 3 are all so far ahead of Jimmy Butler right now that Butler would have to get the Heat to the level of those 3 teams, and they're about 5 games back of those teams. So if Jimmy can do that, that'd be very impressive, and then I'd start putting him in the conversation. But until they're at the level of those teams, I can't do that.
And what do you think about, all this Tyler Hero slander? We've seen Bam Adebayo. We've seen him possibly not being put in top 5 centers in the NBA right now. I want to hear what you think of this Miami young core.
It's the Jason Tatum effect. It's playoff success at such a young age, and everyone expects them to ball out immediately and be like a top 10 player right off the bat. And no, they're not. Just because they stepped up in the playoffs and then they're regressing in the regular season, like, this is going to be a side tangent, but I hate that people say that because everyone expects playoff success. Like, oh, regular season doesn't matter, and they want people to do well in the playoffs. And then these young guys do well in the playoffs, and everyone expects them to do just as good in the regular season. And when they don't, they're crucified for it. Like, I don't understand that at all. Tyler Hero is having a very good season so far. His shooting percentages are a little bit down from last year, but he still has better numbers in pretty much everything. And you look at him on the court, he's just a confident guy. He takes some shots that maybe aren't the best shots to be taking, but you're going to get that out of him. And when he starts to get more consistent and he's making those are going to look like really good shots. So I'm fine with Tyler Hero. Jason Tatum had a lull second year after everyone thought he would blow up. And then his third year, he came out and was an all-star. So I don't know if Tyler Hero will be on the same trajectory. I don't think Tyler Hero is as good as Jason Tatum. And I never thought he was. But I think we could see it in the next 2 or 3 years. We could see Tyler Hero ascend to become an all-star.
Exactly. Also another thing about Tyler Hero, he went from playing a lot of shooting guard minutes off the ball, coming off screens, being a Duncan Robinson type game. And this season, he got thrown in as the starting point guard. Goran Dragic has gotten moved to the backup, and Kendrick Nunn's been the starting shooting guard. And Kendrick Nunn, we both know him as kind of a shot chucker. If you want to do a 2K player, he's like the shot creator. But yet he's like a 72 overall shot creator because most of the shots he takes doesn't go in. It's hard for him to create space. And they've looked at Tyler Hero and said, can you please be the playmaker of this team? And yes, he's only averaging 3.5 assists in 32 minutes, but his spacing on the court, him next to Duncan Robinson, he's never been a great defensive player, but we can't expect Tyler Hero to be hitting all these clutch, crazy shots in the regular season. And I think that the hype around him, yes, I think it was deserved. He's going to be a great player for years to come. I don't know if he ever will make the All-Star game. I could see him possibly in his prime if he averages upwards of 24, 25 points per game at some point. If with Jimmy Butler leaves, then there's a good chance that he could. But if we're talking right now, let him be. Let these little NBA players be. We've let off on Zion, and next he's an All-Star. The media left him, and then he becomes an All-Star, and now they're back. Let Tyler Hero's media be. Don't slander him. He's still shooting a higher field goal percentage than he actually did last year. His 3-point percentage is down about 5%, but his field goal percentage is a little bit higher. But I completely agree with what you had to say about that, and just young players in general.
For sure.
So moving on from our 7th to our 6th. From our 7th to our 6th best team. A team that is very high praised around here. with an inaugural year of 1949-1950. We are talking about the Philadelphia 76ers. Made the playoffs 50 times in their franchise, which is just absolutely remarkable if you think about how long they've been in the NBA for. That's just 20 years of not making the playoffs. Made the finals 9 times, 3 of them being in the 50s, and then a bunch of times in other decades. They have 3 NBA titles. Unfortunately, none in your lifetime, Zach. But
thanks for pointing that out, Hunter.
There's been one. Hey, got a chance this year. There's been one in 1955, one in 1967, and one in 1983. They have a win percentage of 51.5% and an above 500 playoff win percentage, even with making the playoffs 50 times at a 51 win percentage. You know, you look at famous 76er players. We see Julius Erving, Wilt Chamberlain, Dolph Schayes, Allen Iverson, Charles Barkley, Moses Malone. So many to talk about, and possibly Joel Embiid, MVP this year. So what do you have to talk about? I'll leave the floor to you, because next up we got another team that's high praise around here. So let's hear what you guys say about the Sixers history.
2 really cool stats I want to bring up. 3rd most first-round losses of all time for the Sixers. 2nd most second-round losses of all time. We get to the playoffs, and we and all of that, what'd you say, 50 times making the playoffs, right? That's what you said? All of that, and we've only made it to the Eastern Conference Finals 12 times.
I apologize.
We get to it's one of those things. The Sixers are one of those franchises where you think of the Eastern Conference, and the Sixers are always going to be a top 3 or 4 team in the Eastern Conference of all time. I mean, you think the Eastern Conference, you think the Celtics, and then to me, you think the Bulls and the Sixers. I mean, to me, that's the top 3. Just in terms of my head, what I think of as historical franchises in the East, I think the Bucks have to be around that area too, and the Knicks. But to me, it's Celtics, Sixers, and Bulls. And the Sixers, man, 3 decades, 3 championships, been to the playoffs more than most other teams have in their franchises. I don't have the exact numbers on that, but I think their playoff appearances is definitely got to be top 5 or 6 of all time. Been to the championship 9 times, which is more than most other franchises have too. I think that's top 6 as well. I mean, the Sixers are a great franchise, man. The Sixers, I think they have a case for top 5. I just think the other 5 franchises have all done slightly more. But you look at the Sixers, I mean, just look at who's been on their team, man. In the 50s, we had Dolph Schayes, who was a top 3 to 5 player of the 50s. In the 60s, we had Wilt Chamberlain, who was the top 2 player of the 60s. In the 70s, we had Dr. J, who was a top 2 player of the 70s. In the 80s, we had Moses Malone, who not a top few player of the decade, but one of the best centers of the decade. 90s, we had Charles Barkley, too, top 5 power forward of all time. A bit of a lull in the 90s, I'll admit. Sixers weren't at their peak in the 90s.
That's a good time to be bad.
Left. But exactly, right? But then you get Allen Iverson again in the 2000s, and now you got Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons in the 10s, man. It just a plethora of amazing players that have come through Philly history. And they've given us results, too, as a Sixers fan. I can't complain. 3 championships in 3 decades, made the finals 6 other times. Made the finals I think we've made the finals in every single decade except for the 90s and the 2010s. We never made it in either. But great historically, pretty good recently. I know we had our stretch where the Sixers were at the bottom of the, as we call it, the process.
Michael Carter-Williams.
And, the fact that we still have over a 50% win percentage after those years is still very impressive, because we had 3 seasons in a row under 20 wins, which I think might be a record. I don't know if any other team has ever done that before. But if they have, it's probably been the Kings. So.
Oh, my God. We can never go a podcast without slandering the Kings. We have to throw it in at least once. But, no, if you want to talk present
day. That's all
day.
I got. No, that's all I got.
I mean, this team put shooters around Ben Simmons, which is something that, we've been waiting for. Danny Green has not really lived up to the hype, but hey, they're sitting at the 1 seed right now, 27-12. Unfortunately, Joel Embiid just went down with an injury where he'll be out for, I believe, roughly 2 weeks, which thank God, because the injury looked a lot worse than just a 2-week injury when he went down. I think a lot of Sixers fans, probably you as well, your heart jumped a little bit when you saw him go down like that, because especially when
Or like when
the
I got the
Sixers,
notification on my phone.
exactly.
I wasn't watching at the time, but my heart would have been racing if I hadn't been watching.
Yeah, you see, I mean, you look at Sixers in recent history, this seems to be like one of the first years where this team truly is healthy. I mean, Ben Simmons was out his rookie year, Joel Embiid, the same case where he was out for a little bit. Joel Embiid, I don't think anyone expected him to be where he is right now. But this season they are staying healthy. I'll knock on wood for you real quick. And Seth Curry.
Stop doing that.
Seth Curry has been shooting lights out. I believe he has the highest three-point field goal percentage this season. Tobias Harris got Doc Rivers back, and it looks like his own Clippers and Pistons days. He's been playing absolutely incredible, arguably an all-star snub for him as well. Sitting at the 1 seed, do you think the Sixers have what it takes, if we're going to talk unbiased opinions, have what it takes to beat out teams like the Nets and the Bucks to make it to the NBA Finals?
No. I hate to say it, but we're not beating the Brooklyn Nets. Nobody in the East is beating the Brooklyn Nets. You can't beat the Brooklyn Nets unless you have LeBron James and Anthony Davis on your team. And the Sixers currently do not have LeBron James and Anthony Davis. So I think in a 7, I think we could beat them maybe 2 times. I think we could maybe push them to 6. Maybe even 7 if Joel and Ben both have great series. But, I mean, this is James Harden, Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Durant. They should roll through us. I mean, and that's just the case. I mean, they are so much more talented. I mean, I love Embiid, but, he can't compete with 3 guys who are – I mean, you could argue Harden and Durant are both better, and Kyrie's not far behind. So – Embiid can't carry the load like that in a 7-game series as much as I love him. And you saw it in the playoffs last year. He was getting really burnt out after playing for so long. So, stand your ground. I do think the Bucks can beat the Nets.
The Bucks haven't proven anything in recent playoff years.
No, I actually do like that take. If I had to say if any team in the East is going to put up the best fight against the Nets, unfortunately, I think it's going to be Milwaukee instead of Philadelphia. Just watching them over the past week, this Milwaukee team looks like they aren't as dominant as they were last year in the regular season, but they look way more polished and they look way more playoff ready. I think the addition of Drew Holiday was a huge addition for them. We'll talk more about this in the next couple of weeks when we're starting to get into playoff mode. But no, I really like that take. I think Milwaukee is gonna be the best team to go up against the Nets. Unfortunately, back to Philly, we're really good. But I think we need one more piece. I think even like a Kyle Lowry piece could maybe push us up to the level of Brooklyn. It's just I don't see us being able to compete with their 3 stars, and unless Ben can really lock down Durant, I don't see it happening.
Yeah, it's going to be tough for anyone in the East to really compete with that team. I know they've been holding their ground in the regular season, but unless Ben Simmons can learn how to shoot in the second half of the season, he's competing well. His defense has been incredible, arguably the best defender in the NBA. And I agree with what Zach Goldman has to say, where Embiid's conditioning is much better this year, and he doesn't think of burnout as much. What do you think about that, being a Sixers fan?
I think that's a little bit of a biased take by a Sixers fan. No, I'm just playing. Yes, no, Embiid's conditioning has been better this year. But again, I mean, I have to be realistic. I've never seen Joel Embiid play as well in the playoffs as he has in the regular season. Not saying his production dips, but it has in recent years, and it's not significantly, but just a slight bit. You see teams figure out how to guard him a lot better in the playoffs, especially Boston has figured that out very well in recent years.
Yeah.
Not as much last year in the first half, but if you saw in the second half of those games, Embiid's conditioning was a big issue, and the Celtics were figuring out how to stop him down low, and he wasn't able to be as dominant. So I definitely think that it's better this year, though. But again, the competition's a lot better this year than it was last year as well.
The Eastern Conference, even the entire NBA, I know the Eastern Conference has kind of been on a roll. I'm looking through the standings on the right. I see. What is this? 8 out of the 9 teams that are in the top 9 seeds are on a winning streak. And if you look at the Western Conference, they're on a losing streak. So props to the East. They heard us call them the Eastern Conference, and they're starting to win. But go on.
I wasn't talking about the competition overall of the East being better. I was talking about the Brooklyn Nets being better.
Fair point. Moving on. from the 76ers. You did a great analysis of them. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
And now moving from
Your
one
turn.
favorite team into the top 5 for another favorite team. My Warriors jersey, unfortunately, is not up here. It's still packed in one of my bags. But moving on to the Golden State Warriors, sitting at our number 5 spot. I think this is going to be the last time we talk about a team with an under 500 win percentage in the regular season. This team sits at a 48% win percentage throughout the regular season. They've been around since 1946, 1947. They have 6 NBA Finals victories, coming 3 of them coming before 1975 and 1947, 1956, and then 1975. And then obviously in recent years, they've been extremely dominant, led by Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, and a couple years of Kevin Durant, where they won 3 out of 5 championships. But they made the NBA Finals 11 times, which is something I don't think a lot of casual fans really know about. Those before 1970s teams were dominant with Will Chamberlain a part of their team. But I talked about their win percentage being down. You look at their playoff win percentage; they sit at a 54.4% win percentage, which is a 6% increase if you're over their regular season win percentage, which is just a remarkable stat. Yep. And obviously their greatest players, most of them coming in recent history, in Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Kevin Durant, and Draymond Green. But you also have to look back in around before the 2000s was Will Chamberlain, Rick Barry, Paul Arizin, Chris Mullin. I know they had the years with Tim Hardaway and Mitch Richmond. What are your thoughts on the Golden State Warriors history, and why do you have them ranked at number 5 above your 76ers team?
Well, you can't ignore the fact that 6 championships is a lot more than 3 championships. I don't think anyone's going to argue with that one. And really, that is the number one reason. If you look at pretty much all other aspects of their franchise history, the Sixers pretty much have it on the Warriors. But just looking at championships, man, and finals appearances too. The Warriors have 2 more finals appearances and 3 overall more championships. So they did better in those finals as well. Overall, I mean, they have again. I said the Sixers won 3 decades. The Warriors have won 6 in 4 decades, which I also think is impressive. 1 in the 40s, 1 in the 50s, 1 in the 70s, and then obviously the 3 in the past decade. And the biggest knock against them really comes from, again, the under 500 record. And that when you look at from the year 1994 to 2013, the Warriors made the playoffs once. A 20-year stretch, which is for a top, if you're going to call them a top 5 franchise, which we are, that's very pathetic. I mean, that one year was glorious as the We Believe Warriors upset the Mavericks in the first round, but that's a really, really poor mark for that franchise. And if it wasn't for those, man, if Kevin Durant never came to Golden State, I can tell you Philadelphia would probably be a top 5 franchise. But you mentioned it. They have a ton of great players. There's a reason everyone wants to play as the all-time Warriors on NBA 2K. Wilt Chamberlain put up some monster numbers in Golden State. And since then, Steph Curry, Kevin Durant. I mean, the guys of the 90s, Chris Mullin, Mitch Richmond, Tim Hardaway also. Don't sleep on the guys of the 70s either. Rick Barry really carried that championship team. I think a lot of people forget about. So, yeah, the Warriors bottom end of a top 5 franchise. I think when you're looking at like the tiers, really, is you've got 3 teams in 3 through 5 that a lot of people would say are pretty interchangeable. Golden State is at the bottom of those 3 for me, just because of those inconsistent years where they really weren't that good. Hard to be a top 5 franchise or higher than a top 5 franchise when you had 20 years of being really bad. So
exactly, this franchise is 1 game away from having the greatest team in NBA history as well. And that with that 73-9 win team going up 3-1 in 2016, I don't personally want to talk about it that much. But if they were just to have won 1 game, Draymond Green doesn't get suspended for Game 5. To me, this team could arguably put above the team ahead of them, just for the pure fact that they'd have 7 rings and 4 out of 5, which is just an incredible stat line. But you look at recent years, I mean, Stephen Curry's we have him as the second greatest point guard by the end of his career. Should have an argument if this team can stay consistent to possibly be the greatest point guard of all time. Recently, this team's been derailed with injuries, though. If you really look at it, Klay Thompson's been out for now. What will be 2 years by the time he comes back with his Achilles tears, which is just, even though, so many people hate the Warriors for their success, everyone seems to just love Klay Thompson because of just his attitude. who he is as a person. So prayers up to Klay Thompson. I really hope that he can come back at 100%. Hopefully you don't lose the shooting touch, which I hope he doesn't lose it in the legs, because that's something that really the Warriors will need. But Stephen Curry's having an MVP caliber season, really carrying the load of this team. Last night, the Warriors got blown out by the Lakers. He had 15 in the first quarter. But I'm just saying the Warriors are a 7 through 10 seed that you are not going to want to play them in that play-in tournament. Right now, they sit at the 9 seed at the same record as the New York Knicks, which is kind of shocking to say that sitting at 20-20. But I mean, this team just have winners. Draymond Green's been a winner throughout his career, one of the highest win percentage players in NBA history. They drafted James Wiseman to be their center of the future, who I think has the potential to possibly carry this franchise through the 2020s. Possibly be upwards of a 20-10 player throughout his career if these players can treat him right. Kelly Oubre, although he started off the season very, very bad, I remember there's a couple of podcasts where I just completely went off on Kelly Oubre and that signing. But now recently he's been playing a lot better. His confidence came back. His shooting touch has been back. And one very underrated part of this team, Andrew Wiggins, and how Andrew Wiggins was looked at as one of the biggest, one of the worst number one overall picks for a while. Didn't live up to a hype, although he still is not living up to his hype. His defense has grown incredibly. His offensive shot selection has been great, and I think you put him next to in a situation where he does not have to be that number one player like the Timberwolves wanted him to be for so long, and he's really producing. What do you think the Warriors need to do to beat out those teams ahead of them, which include the Mavericks, the Spurs, and the Blazers?
Do
you think a trade needs to be made?
I think they need to get better offensively, because I think outside of Steph Curry, their offense has been really, really bad this year. I mean, you just watched that game, their last two games, really. It looks so frustrating out there for Steph Curry that, I mean, the movement is not what it used to be in those teams from the past. And Curry gives these guys wide open shots. He's been a great playmaker this year. And I mean, they just miss open shots, man. It's so frustrating to watch, especially if you're a Warriors fan. I think they're very underrated defensively. I think Oubre is a great defender. Wiggins is a great defender. Obviously, Draymond and Wiseman have been good this year too defensively. But I think they need one more offensive piece. One more offensive piece to really make a run at being really a playoff team.
Do you think that they have a chance to knock off any of those top-tier Western Conference teams? Say they get in as a 6, 7, 8 seed. They go up against a team like the Jazz, the Suns, or the LA teams. What teams do you think they have a chance against?
It's the wild, wild West. Anyone can beat anyone this year. I'm telling you. I think we'll see a major first-round upset in the West this year, whether it be Golden State, Dallas, even if Denver falls back and is back in the 6, 7, 8 range. I think one of those three teams is going to shock a top 3 or 4 team in the West in the first round. I can't tell you who it's going to be right now. I think the Warriors are the least equipped to do that to a team because it would really require them to get hot. They would need Kelly Oubre to go off. They would need Andrew Wiggins to go off. Yeah. And so far from what I've seen, it takes a lot for both of them to go off in the same night. So I think right now the Warriors should focus on making the playoffs first before looking to shock a team. But, I mean, right now I think they could – I don't know, man. Really, I don't see them beating either of the LA teams, Phoenix or Utah right now. I think they need to start playing a lot better. But out of those 4, I think Utah will be the easiest to beat in the playoffs.
Ooh, more Utah slander.
But out of those, I think Utah is very well equipped to play Golden State, so I don't think Golden State would beat them.
Exactly. You look at it, Zach and I always say to NBA fans, what are your thoughts on Draymond Green? And depending on that answer, we either respect them as an NBA fan or we call them a casualist, because Draymond Green is one of the most underrated players in NBA history. This season, he's averaging, just actually 5.9 points per game. So you would think, he has no impact on the court. 6.1 rebounds and 8.5 assists with also 1.5 steals and just under a block per game. His just presence on the court for this Golden State Warriors team is incredible. I think when it all is said and done, he could be one of the greatest power forwards to ever play for, if not the greatest power forward to ever play with the Golden State Warriors, depending on what you call Kevin Durant, obviously. But
small forward, he played small forward there the whole time.
That's why I would say that. But this team just has very
Rick Barry though.
So Jordan Poole has been solid for them when he's been not in the G League. And I am high on James Wiseman. I think he's only averaging 12 points per game. He's had a couple, weird things that happened with him his rookie season. He looks like he's not really equipped mentally there yet in the NBA. But if you have any last thoughts on the Warriors before I move on.
No, I think you covered most of it.
Sounds good. But
I like Juan Toscano Anderson. Look out for him. He's a bucket.
I love him, averaging 5 points in just under 20 minutes. He's been a fun player for this team.
Yep.
Moving on to our top 4 now. This is where things get close. I know I talked to my dad right before this. Thank you, Dad, for first off choosing to be a Warriors fan in the 1990s, because it made the past 5 years for me very fun. But when we were talking about, I read him my list. My dad was like, "Ooh, these next 2 are going to be very, very close." When you really look at it, because it's we value winning, consistency, greatness. What do we value? But you go first.
My dad said the exact same thing. He said he would have switched our 3 and 4, but he said it's very close.
Exactly. So sitting at our 4 spot, I think we all know who 1 and 2 is. So this is the big reveal. Sitting at our 4 spot, we have the Chicago Bulls. Starting their franchise in 1966, 1967. And obviously the 1990s is what makes this franchise not a bottom 5 franchise of all time. Because if you really look at it, they've won 6 NBA titles in 6 years and never made it besides those Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen years. We all know about Michael Jordan, the 91, 92, 93, and then another three-peat from 96 to 98. Made the playoffs so 35 times as a franchise. Have a franchise win percentage of just under 51% and a playoff win percentage of just over 54%. But of course, if we're going to talk about Chicago Bulls, you got Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, and Dennis Rodman, and those led teams. But you look outside of them, they had those incredible years, and this team could possibly be looked at as a top 3, top 2 franchise if Derrick Rose really never did get injured from that MVP, because who knows what would have happened. But they also have underrated players in their franchise like Bob Love, Artis Gilmore, Jakeem Noah. Talk to me about the Chicago Bulls and why you put them at number 4.
I just did this for fun. After I ranked these, I just pretended Michael Jordan never existed. You took out all of it because obviously they wouldn't win all those championships. You take out pretty much the success Michael Jordan had for the Bulls, and if you re-rank them without that success, I had the Bulls at 26.
Wow, that's great.
From 4 to 26 because of the GOAT. And that's it. So, that's really all there is to it, man. 3 franchises in NBA history have an undefeated finals record. The Kings, 1-0, which is amazing. Good. The first time I'll say something good about the Kings. And the Raptors, who are 1-0.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Bulls, who are 6-0. No other team is undefeated in the finals before. And obviously those 6 came with Michael Jordan. Outside of Michael Jordan, this franchise would have had zero finals wins, 0 finals appearances, and only 3 Eastern Conference finals appearances, which I'm sorry, is just not what you're looking for in a franchise. And the reason why, a lot of people will debate between, obviously, I'm going to spoil it right now, the Spurs and the Bulls are the 3-4 that people are debating between. Mm-hmm. The reason I have the Spurs above is because so much of this franchise's success depends on one person. And I guess you could argue Tim Duncan for the Spurs, but I think even Tim Duncan had more help than Jordan did. You have Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, Kawhi Leonard, all those guys, Greg Popovich. So much, I think, contributed more to the Spurs being a great franchise, where the Bulls was Michael Jordan, and then it's been everything since has been garbage. Everything before was pretty much garbage. I know they had a couple Artis Gilmore good years in the 70s, and then they've had the 1 year with Derrick Rose and Joakim Noah where they made the Eastern Conference Finals. Other than that, it's been a tough road for the Bulls. Top 4 franchise because of one man. Very, very crazy.
Exactly. Recent years, this team has been one of the worst teams in the NBA. I believe they've had the number 7 overall pick, for so long. It seems like they've had it for 5 to 10 years now, just the 7th overall pick. They trade away Jimmy Butler, who was looking to be like the cornerstone of this franchise and hopefully be, they wanted Derrick Rose to be. He ends up not liking the front office, as no one did. I'm forgetting the head coach's name, Jim Boylan. But Jim Boylan was one of the worst coaches in the NBA at that point. And you look at their team now; they're in contention right now for the play-in game. They have Zach LaVine, All-Star, arguably starter this year, but came off the bench, averaging 28 points per game, 5-5. He's been just an incredible player, incredible scorer for them, and the development of him is really, really great. Got Warren Markkinen averaging just under 20 points per game, very quietly as well. I know he's only played 17 games out of the 37, but he's been a pretty good player for them this season. You got Kobe White, who I don't know if Kobe White and Zach LaVine is going to be the answer for the backcourt, but they look like they're pretty young right now, and they're looking on the uprise. What do you think about the present-day Chicago Bulls, and do you think that they can compete for that play-in game?
I think they can compete for it, but in the end, I don't think it's going to matter because they'll get smacked in the first round by whoever they play if they do make it. I mean, the Sixers beat them pretty good the other night without Embiid or Ben Simmons, and the Bulls were playing with full health. So, I mean, this Bulls team to me is one of the least dangerous teams in the conferences. I love Zach LaVine, but they don't have enough other pieces around him to really contend. I don't even think they're going to end up making the plan, honestly. I think that's going to go to teams like Toronto, Indiana, Atlanta, Charlotte, New York. Those teams will be competing for it instead, and I think the Bulls will be the last team out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see this team really making that much noise. I know they had Billy Donovan seems to be a very good coach for this team, as he's really brought this team upwards of close to 500 record this season, which they have been near for the past couple seasons. We were both a little on the edge about the Patrick Williams draft pick at 4. Started every single game for this team so far, which is kind of shocking if you really think about it. And he's averaging 10.2 points in 28 minutes of play. He can only go up from here. He's got big hands, long wingspan, so maybe he can make some noise in his career. But I think we're both on edge about him as a player. But besides really those Michael Jordan years, there's really not much to talk about the Chicago Bulls. I know they had Artis Gilmore for a little bit, one of our favorite players to use on 2K. But really, besides that, this team has been they had their chance with Derrick Rose and Joakim Noah, but unfortunately, Derrick Rose went down with those injuries, and I know all Bulls fans and that have been a fan for the past 20 years really hate talking about that. But I might get some criticism for this, but I also think that Bulls team overachieved a little bit. I don't think they were as good as people make them out to be. I think they had a lot of really good role players. I think it was a case of like the 2011 Mavericks, where it was a team where you have one star and a bunch of really, really good other like second, third, fourth options really ball out and have 1 year where they're really, really like a great team. Who knows what would have happened with Chicago in the future, but I don't know. I think people over exaggerate how good those early 2010 teams were. Exactly. So now, as we already spoiled before, we're moving on from the Chicago Bulls to our number 3 team, which is the San Antonio Spurs, a more recent team than the Chicago Bulls, starting in 1976, 1977. They have their 5 NBA titles, all coming over a span of in 20 years. But they had kind of similar players throughout the entire thing. Their first one came right before 2000, 1999, then 2003, 2005, 2007, every 2 years, and then again in 2014. But they made the finals 6 times. As we all know, they had that one loss to the Miami Heat, the LeBron James, Dwayne Wade-led team, when Ray Allen hit one of the greatest shots, what seems like in NBA history. But when you talk about the Spurs, they have the highest regular season win percentage in all of the NBA, sitting at 61.8%. Just absolutely remarkable if you really think about that. Playoff win percentage.
It's not even close.
Yeah, they're fifth. They're
it's
about
not even close.
Anyone after that, which is just 55% win percentage. And you look at their players, as we already mentioned, Tim Duncan, David Robinson, Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker, Kawhi Leonard, George Gervin, Alvin Robertson. I know you made your post on the Spurs when you're talking about them. I'll bring it up a little bit, but maybe you haven't yet. I don't think you have yet. But talk to me about the San Antonio Spurs history.
Since the NBA-ABA merger, the Spurs have missed the playoffs 5 times. That's it. Just 5 times. Michael Jordan. That's about as many. There's only one less championships than Jordan won. Is how many times the Spurs missed the playoffs. To me that is incredible. And even before the Tim Duncan years and Greg Popovich years, where they won 5 championships and were 1 shot away from 6 and being 6-0, just like the Bulls. because they would have been 6-0, just like the Bulls if Ray Allen hadn't made that ridiculous shot. Other than that, you look at prior to that, they were a consistent playoff team every single year. They made it to the Western Conference Finals multiple times, led by David Robinson, and before that, George Gervin. I don't know, man. I think the Spurs franchise is just consistently successful throughout all the years. They never had a lull like the Bulls did. Or the Warriors. They've been every year. You can bank on the Spurs being a top 5 team in the West. Like I said, there's only been 5 years out of the, I think it's over 40 something that they've been in the NBA.
Yep.
I think it's 45 in the NBA, right? So they're 40 for 45. That is a ridiculous mark. Compare that to a 40-year stretch in Clippers history when they were 7-40. It's incredible what the Spurs have been able to accomplish. They make it to the final. When they do make it to the finals, they perform. Like I said, going 5-4-6.
Tim Duncan's one of the greatest winners of all time. I know you had him at your 4 spot when we were ranking NBA players all time. I believe I had him at 4 through 7 is a toss-up. I don't remember exactly where I had him, but Tim Duncan could be put anywhere in there. And it's all because of his success with San Antonio. But if we're going to talk recent years, I think we both had them. Oh, yeah, you can take it.
One more thing before you start talking recent. I just thought this would be a good comparison. The Spurs have made the Western Conference Finals 14 times in those 45 years compared to a couple other teams around them. The Bulls have only made it 11 in over 50 years, and the Warriors have only made it to 13 in over 70 years. So I think that shows it. I think that's a stat that shows a lot of. I know one less championship than those teams, but overall the Spurs have had a ton more success. Nice, go ahead.
And somehow, with all this success, we still put them at the bottom of our power rankings this season, just for them to prove us wrong and sit at the 7 seed. I remember immediately after we finished the podcast, we sat here in StreamYard for a little bit, and Zach said to me, "Why am I doubting Greg Popovich right now?" And next thing you know, he was right. Yep. They're sitting at 20-16 right now on just a 1-game win streak. DeMar DeRozan, probably in my opinion, the biggest Western All-Star snub. He's been incredible. His just changing of his game into a playmaking forward. He's gone to the power forward position, which if you had told me that back in his Toronto days, that is just crazy to say. But he has played the power forward position and played incredible during it. LaMarcus Aldridge is going to get moved by the end. If you haven't heard the recent news, he is on the trade market. He will not play until he gets moved, which honestly, fair enough. I don't think he fits the timeline of this team because they're really running this young core of Dejounte Murray, Lonnie Walker, Devin Vassell, Keldon Johnson, Jakob Poeltl, even all these young, great players that I think we just love the Spurs this season. They've been, we talked very, very highly about them when we talk about our present day NBA. Sitting at 20-16 right now, do you really think this is an actual representation of where this team should stand above teams like the Warriors, Grizzlies, and even the Mavericks?
Yes. The Spurs team is so good. I'm not betting against Popovich. I'm not, because this Spurs. I've watched the Spurs team and they belong up there, man. I think the Spurs team right now. I've been watching. I watch this. If you put the Spurs and the Warriors in a 7-game playoff series right now, I'm taking the Spurs. If you put the Spurs and the Grizzlies in a 7-game playoff series, I'm taking the Spurs. Mavericks, I would take the Mavericks in. That's the one I would disagree with. But I really like the Spurs. I think they will be in the playoffs, or they'll be that last team that might slip out. But I think they're just as good as these teams around them. I don't think they're a fluke at all. I want to mention my man, Keldon Johnson. I've hyped him up so much on here. I'm telling you, Keldon Johnson one day will be a top 20, top 15 player in the league. I'm so high on him, and I think he's only getting better. The explosiveness, the nice shooting touch, the defense, so much about him in that Popovich system. He could very easily turn into Kawhi Leonard. Huge fan of him. But also, I know you love DeJounte Murray. If you want to talk more about him, you can. But I love him, and I think Lonnie Walker is a great bench scorer to come off the bench, do a little microwave scoring, led by DeRozan. I'm so high on this team. I've hyped them up all year since week 3 of the season. I wish I'd seen it coming before the season. I won't pretend to claim that I knew this was coming. I did not see it coming. But since they've really gotten going, I've been all over the bandwagon. Huge, very high on the Spurs this year.
Deontay Murray to me is like a slow-paced Russell Westbrook, where you wouldn't think in your head, you would think Russell Westbrook's slow pace wouldn't be the same player. He relies on his energy. Deontay Murray relies on the pacing of the game, averaging 16.7 rebounds and 5 assists. He hasn't even had to be the star playmaker of the team, as DeMar DeRozan has played the power forward position and averaging 7.5 assists this season, which is just absolutely incredible. If you really look at him, he's never been a playmaker.
6'6". Or yeah. He's 6'5" or 6'6", something like that, but not power forward height.
No, not at all. And to me, this Spurs team is very fun. Look out for them for upcoming years. Hopefully, Popovich stays around, because I think no one wants to see Popovich leave the NBA just yet. You're high.
Tim Duncan can coach him.
Exactly. And what's her name? Becky Hammond.
Yes.
She's been
both of them. I think that'd be a great coaching staff. Duncan and Hammond. That would be the Spurs would. I think the Spurs would continue to chug along as if Popovich was still there with those two.
Exactly. No, but Deontay Murray to me has been one of my favorite players. I'm looking to actually get his jersey possibly up on this wall at some point, because I like him that much. But no, I think this Spurs team is on the uprise. We had them when we made a post actually on Backcourt Press a while back about, the NBA is a game of runs. I think I talked about the Spurs and how just incredible they were coming out of the no one expected them to really be this good of a team. And next thing you know, they come out and they're sitting 4 games above 500. And obviously their playoff success, it's hard to bank against Greg Popovich.
I don't mean to call you out, but I'm pretty sure you had the Kings ahead of the Spurs before this season.
We're not going to talk about that. Moving on to our top 2. If you haven't tuned in already, please feel free to tune in. Thank you to everyone who's commented so far. Keep the comments coming, especially as we get into our top 2. This is where it's going to get pretty exciting. I know a bunch of people are wondering, are we going to have the Celtics one, or are we going to have the Lakers one? But, Zach being a Sixers fan, and me, and obviously with statistics and everything like that, coming in at our number 2 spot, right in front of the San Antonio Spurs, is the Boston Celtics. One of the greatest franchises in NBA history. What were you gonna say?
You really thought I was gonna put the Celtics at 1? Hell no, never happening. Wasn't even close. I knew the Lakers were gonna be 1 the moment I started this list. Wasn't even close. Go on.
But at the number 2 spot, starting in 1946 and 1947, they have 17 finals wins, 21 finals appearances. I think going 17 for 21 in the NBA Finals is just incredible. Props to Wilt Chamberlain for losing that much. 58 years they've been a playoff team. They have a 59.1% win percentage in the regular season, which ends up being the 3rd highest on the list, and a 57% playoff win percentage. And you look back at the Boston Celtics, they're not a team using 2K that much, because a lot of for their all-time team, because a lot of them are older players like Bill Russell, Larry Bird, Bob Cousy, Tom Havlicek.
I will cook anyone listening to this with the all-time Celtics.
I hate Bob Cousy in 2K. Don't forget about guys like Dave Cohen, Kevin McHale, Sam Jones, and obviously they had the Paul Pierce, Ray Allen, Kevin Garnett years where they won the championship in 2010 and 2008. 2008, lost in 2010. But talk to me about the Boston Celtics and how you have them at number 2.
Well, they've only won 1 championship on colored TV, so I think that's got to be something to consider. No, all jokes aside, I know I like to rag on the Celtics as a Sixers fan, but you have to appreciate what they've done. And despite that, I always feel like I'm hyping up their players. I love all those old Celtics guys. Pretty much any Celtics player pre-90s, I'm a fan of. I love the guys on those 60s and 80s teams that were really dominant. Bill Russell, man, needs to get his respect. Bill Russell needs to get his respect. 11 championships is just out of this world in 13 years. It's ridiculous. 10 in a row. I can't even, 8 in a row. I can't even understate how impressive that is. I don't care that it's the 60s. And then Larry Bird did it 3 more times. Don't forget Dave Cowens and JoJo White did it 2 times in the 70s. Bird did it 3 times in the 80s. And then since then, just 1. And that's the difference maker, really. Since 1986, the Celtics have won 1 championship and have only made it twice. So there tells you why the Lakers are ahead. For comparison, both teams have 17 championships. The The Lakers have 32 finals appearances, where the Celtics only have 21. The Lakers have, I'm sorry, where was I going with this? I'm sorry. Yes, the Lakers have 35 Western Conference titles title appearances compared to the Celtics 31. So again, the Celtics are lower on that. And like I said, just era consistency. The Lakers have been much better across all eras, whereas the Celtics have only won one in the last 3 decades.
Exactly. We talk about the Boston Celtics recently. They've struggled this season, but this team has they've been consistent. They've been a consistent playoff team for their entire franchise history, if you really look at it. And now they're on the uprise with young players like Jason Tatum, Peyton Pritchard, and Jaylen Brown. I think all three of those guys deserve their respect. Peyton Pritchard, very underrated player in the NBA right now. Kemba Walker, he hasn't looked great. He's been finding his rhythm back with the Celtics, but right now they're sitting at the 5 seed, I believe, right underneath the Miami Heat. And I just want to hear your thoughts on the Celtics team. I know you're, being the Sixers fan, you hope that you could eliminate them in the second round to make it to the Eastern Conference Finals. But what do you think about the Celtics team? What do you think they need to do to put themselves in championship contention?
First of all, the Celtics better worry about getting out of the first round before they worry about us in the second round. Second of all, I made a post on this a couple weeks ago on Backcourt Press, but I think Danny Ainge has really fumbled the ball as a GM with this team. This is a team that went to the Eastern Conference Finals last year and had all the pieces to do it again, and he just completely screwed up this offseason, not trading for a center, signing Tristan Thompson, losing Gordon Hayward for nothing. And even look back to a couple of years ago. Exactly. You even look back to a couple of years ago and Kyrie Irving, trading him and letting Kyrie Irving walk, and then trading Terry Rozier for Kemba Walker. All of these decisions are looking very bad in retrospect now. I think Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are both fantastic players, and I think the Celtics have a good cornerstone for the future with those two. But I think it's up to the GM to him to put a good team around them to win a championship, and he has not been able to do that yet. So in terms of this season, I don't see them making it out of the first round.
Yeah, especially if they have to go up against that Miami Heat team. Jimmy Butler will just absolutely torch them like he did last year. And Bam Adebayo, they're going to have no answer for him because it looks like right now they're going to roll with Tristan Thompson and Daniel Tice as their big man. And these their experiments are really not working out for them right now in the big man category.
And it's amazing with Miles Turner is now on the market, and the Celtics aren't even in consideration for him. There's like 6 or 7 teams that have already expressed interest, and Boston is not one of them. I don't know, man.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting. Danny Ainge has always been looked at.
It's happy for me as a Sixers fan. But.
Yeah, I feel like Danny Ainge has always been looked at as one of the best general managers in the league, and then this past season, people are starting to realize maybe he can't be looked at like that anymore. I know he's an incredible making draft selections. He drafted Jaylen Brown. He traded back to draft Jason Tatum, which is looking like one of the best moves. If Tatum turns out to be what everyone hypes him up to be, one of the best trade backs in recent NBA years. But you don't put the right guys around them, this team's not going to be successful for a couple years to come. You can only go so far with 19-year-old Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, also arguably all-star starter and great two-way player Jaylen Brown, who I think no one expected him to be this good in the NBA. I know he's the number 3 overall pick, but no one expected him to really take this leaps that he has.
No, for sure. For sure.
And that moves us on. We've got through 29 NBA franchises, and sitting at number 1, the LeBron James-led right now Los Angeles Lakers. This team has
don't put LeBron James in front of Los Angeles Lakers. Oh my God, he's not even a top 5 player in their franchise history. Sorry, go ahead.
It's 32 NBA Finals appearances since 1948, 1949. 17 of them, just under a 50% win ratio. 17 for 30, or just over a 50% win ratio. 17 for 32. 62 years they've made it to the playoffs. They have just under a 60% win percentage of 59.5%. It's over a 60% playoffs win percentage. I think that's the first time we've seen this so far. Sitting at 60.1% playoff win percentage, going 454 and wins and 301 losses. That's just remarkable to me. And this is the team everyone wants to use their all-time team in 2K. Kobe Bryant, Magic Johnson, Kareem, Shaq, Jerry West, Elgin Baylor, Wilt Chamberlain, LeBron, George, Mike, and James Worthy. What do you have to say about the greatest, Anthony? What do you have to say about the greatest NBA franchise of all time?
A mind-blowing stat for you is what I have. Since in the years 1948 to 2013. 1948 to 2013, the Lakers missed the playoffs 5 times.
Wow.
And then they missed it the next 6 years in a row.
Jordan Hill, Xavier Henry, those teams were fun.
Robert Sacre.
Yep.
Yeah, the really 5 bad years, and other than that, I mean, the Lakers have just won, man. They've won in the 40s, they won in the 50s, they won in the 70s, they won in the 80s, they won in the 2000s, they won in the 2020s now. I mean, they just have so many different periods of success. I mean, 17 championships, just ridiculous. In all those appearances too, man. I mean, 17 chips, 15 losses. That's crazy. 32 times. I mean, you just look at the history of the NBA, and the Lakers have been in the championship 32 of the 70 years. That's like half.
Crazy.
It's ridiculous. The Lakers are just the definition of dominance in the NBA, and to me, I know people say the Celtics are there. I don't think the Celtics are there. I think the Lakers have a pretty good grip on the number 1 franchise in NBA history.
Also, if they get Anthony Davis back healthy and strong this year, they can make a case to arguably make that 33 finals appearance. And who knows with the Brooklyn Nets, what that'll happen. But, I mean, they are on track right now, what it looks like, with their best player in the NBA and LeBron James. And according to ESPN's preseason power rankings for players, the second best player in the NBA, Anthony Davis, sitting to make their run for the championship. Do you think there's any weaknesses to this team? And if a team in the West were to beat them out this season, why would they beat them, and who would it be?
Their biggest weakness right now is the injury of Anthony Davis. I mean, LeBron is amazing, but if Anthony Davis isn't around, they're losing in the first round, in my opinion. I mean, they've done well without him recently. I think they could put up a fight with someone like Dallas and Golden State or those teams. I think maybe they could win that kind of series, but they wouldn't make it out of the second round at the very least. They need Anthony Davis healthy. They need him ready to go. As long as they have that, I don't think they're getting beat in the Western Conference, unless it would take. I mean, because I just don't think any of the other teams are well equipped to beat them. Utah lacks a legit, someone who can stop LeBron. Like, they don't have that. No, they have no defense. They have no answer for LeBron. Yeah. Yeah, no, if you watched Utah LA this year, you would know. I love Joe Ingles, but Utah can't stop him. The Clippers can't close games. And, I mean, I dare I say Phoenix probably has the best chance right now. But even Chris Paul's never been able to get it done in the playoffs before. So, who knows?
Yeah, honestly, if the Lakers end up making the finals, I don't think it'd be able to be a surprise to anyone. I think we're all hoping for that Kyrie, James Harden, Kevin Durant versus LeBron, Anthony Davis, and Taylor Horton Tucker, Los Angeles Lakers, Brooklyn Nets. Can't forget about what I believe some NBA analysts the other day just said. I think Kyle Kuzma should be the player that closes out games for the Lakers. And honestly, I completely agree. Gosh, I don't know how those guys get paid so much money, but no, I mean, 30
Are you sure?
That's crazy.
That's a hot take. I feel like it's got to be Wes Matthews.
Caruso? Can't forget about the other Antetokounmpo brother.
Gasol. Thanasis.
But don't worry, they're probably going to end up getting Andre Drummond because that's how the NBA has gone this year. Just random players signing with the best teams in the NBA. It's just absolutely crazy. Do you think Andre Drummond would put them over the hump to possibly beat the Nets, I guess you could say?
I feel yeah, I don't know, man. Just throw all of our superstars on 2 teams and then let them battle it out in the finals. I couldn't tell you what the hell's going to happen. I would need to see LA play with Andre Drummond before I could decide if they're significantly better with him than without. but just knowing Andre Drummond's impact, he would improve them, but not dramatically.
Yeah. Do you have anything else to say about the Lakers as a franchise currently before we end the podcast of doing all 30 NBA franchises?
Put some more respect on Jerry West's name. I'll probably make a couple more posts about him in the future, but he's someone that I feel like doesn't get the respect he deserves. Third best Laker of all time.
Wow, that's actually a very hot take if you were to think about all the great players that have played for the Los Angeles Lakers. I mean, I went over them earlier, but still, there's just been so many duos. You look at the duos of this, you got which one? Well, actually, here's a funny question. Which duo would you take out of all the Lakers? Magic and Kareem, Shaq and Kobe, Kobe and Marcus Gasol, Wilt and Jerry
Magic
West.
and Kareem. Magic and Kareem.
Kobe, yeah, who's second?
Kobe and Shaq. I mean, LeBron and Anthony Davis is ridiculous. Jerry West and Elgin Baylor is ridiculous.
Yeah,
but I gotta go Kobe and Shaq number 2. I mean, they won 4 championships together for a reason. 3 championships together for a reason. So
exactly,
probably them. But no, I don't think anyone beat Magic and Kareem.
That's a fun take. But hey, thank you to everyone who tuned in for the entire 3 parts of this series. It's been a fun series to do. We'll try and do possibly another one, but now we're starting to get into playoff mode for the NBA. So probably going to start shifting over into that. And there's the trade deadlines coming up soon. Players are getting released left and right, and the Lakers and Nets are picking players up left and right. So be sure to continuously follow us on Instagram at Backcourt Press. Highly active on that if you haven't already. Thank you to the people that commented and liked the podcast. There is our 30 through worst to first, ranking all 30 NBA franchises, and it is Backcourt Press signing off for today. Thank you to everyone who watched. Make sure to follow us on all social media platforms, and have a great rest of your day, everyone. Peace out.